Did the Baylor Bears have the most impactful transfer portal class so far in 2025? Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. It is a Wicker Wednesday here on the show. So Sydney Wicker back after a couple weeks off. I put off in quotations because Sydney is very, very busy this time of year. Yes, yes. Sydney, good to have you back.
Thank you so much.
And I'm glad you are alive and kicking here.
Yeah, barely, but we're making it. I'm so my goal, I tell you this every time, is to say that I'm not tired next week, but that's really my goal this week. And after I get through it, maybe we'll be a little less tired. But how can you not be tired when baseball starts this weekend? Basketball's like hitting its peak. Softball season just started last week. Like, it's just too much.
We're in it, baby. We are in it. They call it the doldrums in other sports, not what we're working in right now. We are talking a little bit of everything, really. Like you like your three major men's sports. We're talking about it today. Football, basketball, baseball. We are looking at who had the best portal windows in the Big 12 in 2025 so far, because there's another one. The injury that could shake up the Bears season even more than it already has been, and how Baylor baseball is going to surprise you a little bit this year. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Starting in football, Sydney, we're done. I mean, I think people, I don't know, the portal, you could still like sign on at this point because there's all kinds of different rules to it. But really, this window is done. It's been done for a couple of weeks for Baylor, and I think the Bears did pretty well. But all we've heard about is Texas Tech. Tech is so great. Tech's doing this, that, and the other. They're bringing in like literally the best football players ever to play football ever into their squad this year. And if you look at the rankings on like your 247s, your on threes in terms of this spring transfer portal window, Baylor's somewhere in the middle in the Big 12, just based on their computer rankings and the numbers and the algorithm and all that. But I saw this list recently, and it was the top 10 highest impact transfer portal classes in all of college football, not just the Big 12. And yes, Tech is on there. Tech's number 3. But sitting there at number 6, top 10 in America, the Baylor Bears, the team that we are so locked on, is sitting there at number 6. Now, this is an important distinction. Impactful versus, hey, look at all the players you brought in. So I'll frame it to you this way, Sydney. You watch this team. We saw the needs that they had, especially at the end of the season. They addressed it on the coaching staff. They addressed it in the spring transfer portal window. Do you think this Baylor team is significantly more ready for the start of a season in 2025 than they were in 2024 based off this portal window?
That's a tough question. Are they more ready? I like how you framed that very specifically.
Look here. Okay. Communications major. We know how to communicate.
Do you mean, are they more ready, like if they were to play a football game tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, that's a way to look at it. I was more looking at it of like, hey, if they started the season tomorrow, would they start 2-4? Like, would you expect them to go 2-4?
I don't think I would expect them to go 2-4.
Good start.
But I don't think I could see them having maybe more than 1 or 2 wins than they already had this season at this
in total.
Moment. Total.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, are you saying like 1-3 instead of 2-4?
No, in total.
Okay, so you're looking at them as a 9 or 10 win team in toto, which includes a win in the college football playoff.
Well, that's
which would mean they're a 9-win team or an 8-win team going into the college football playoff. Sydney is throwing out some bold statements here. We are putting words in her mouth.
Bold questions.
I just find this fascinating because really this is the way we should be looking at the transfer portal, right? Like there are all kinds of teams that bring in great talent every year and it doesn't do much for them because the starting points are not the same. That's why these rankings, while we all look at them, right? The computer generated point system rankings, why there's a fallacy there because they're not all at the same starting point. And so like Tech, absolutely, they brought in the most amount of talent, right? They absolutely did. And they won 8 games this year, just like Baylor did. But Baylor was in a better position at the end of the season in terms of their roster turnover or lack thereof. So while it might not be like, hey, Sydney, are they going to go to the playoff now because they have these guys? We looked at the defense at the end of the season, and we said, boy, they need to improve that. They went out and they got 2 probably plug-and-play starting linebackers. They went out and got a nose tackle. They need some help at receiver. They bring one in the portal, in Kobe Prentice from Alabama. And it doesn't include the surprise addition of bringing Ashton Hawkins back, which we learned at the end of last week. It just feels like, as we look at this in February, there's not a lot of holes on this team right now, which isn't always the case for us at Baylor.
Yeah, I think the problem with Baylor, though, is getting all of those holes to fit in the positions they need to.
Well, sure, yeah.
There was just a lot of chaos, it felt like, in that last season. So when you ask if they're ready, it's, do the coaches have them ready? Have they figured out their team enough yet to be able to put these guys in the right spots so that they can start week 1 ready to go, not peaking halfway in the middle of the season when they finally start to figure it out? Like, it's got to start in week 0 pretty much if you want to have that success. I do think it's awesome, though. They've got 3 Texas teams in this list. I think that speaks a lot to how the transfer portal and even just guys wanting to come play here says about the talent in the state. I know that's something we've talked about a lot, but
Absolutely.
I thought that was pretty neat to see.
I'll ask you, I'll give you one more question to frame it this way in terms of the impact. Okay. So both these teams, Tech and Baylor, won 8 games last year. Tech is losing more to graduation in the NFL than Baylor is. They bring in a really star-studded class, and people will say, well, they need to gel together first, and that's true, but they do have 8 months to do it. So what position would you rather be in? Baylor, which doesn't have a ton of roster turnover and also won 8 games, it was pretty hot last year, or Tech, who does have roster turnover but brings in a ton of talent and also starts with an 8-win season from last year?
Yeah. I think I'd rather be in Baylor's position.
Good answer.
I like having that experience with Tech, just guys coming in who are already at that level. But I think there's something to the chemistry, like being able to build off your already like set foundation is huge. So I like it.
I would agree. I would agree, not just because I'm the host of this podcast, but because I learned my lesson from last year, truly. Because after the Bears went 3-9, like nobody entered the transfer portal. It was like maybe 10 total by the time spring football was over. That's a low number.
Yeah.
And I remember having a discussion on this podcast, talking about it on the radio. It's like, is that the best thing? Like, this team just went 3-9. You want everyone coming back? And they did step up in year 2. Obviously, Baylor added some guys in the portal from last year that certainly helped out in 2024. But now it's like, well, can they take a step up? Probably, because we just saw them do it last year. So I think it would be overblown to say that, you know, Tech is just bringing in these new guys and they need to gel together because they have that much time to do so. But I would much rather have the guys that you played with last year and were pretty successful. But maybe that's just me and Sydney. Maybe that's just us. One guy that will not be stepping up because he will not be coming back for Baylor this year is Josh Ojamwana. We have to talk about the impact of that injury. We have to talk about that next on Locked On Baylor. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at Wayfair, the sponsor of today's video. After the holiday hustle, even this far after, there's nothing like giving your home a little TLC. I'm not talking about no scrubs. I'm talking about tender love and care. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine, helps me stay a little bit more sane. So whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or you just want to give your space a new look to start the year, Wayfair has everything you need, and it's all within your budget. I'm looking for some more furniture to fill up this small space here, and my favorite part about Wayfair, not just fitting my style and my budget, my eclectic style and my small budget, but the free and hassle-free delivery, even for those large items. Great getting around the city, let me tell you. There's something for every style and every home, and Wayfair makes it easy to tackle all your 2025 home goals. Trust me. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's Wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Back here on a Wicker Wednesday, Sydney Wicker, Channel 6, KCEN. We're talking some Baylor basketball now. Josh Ojamwina, it's announced, news dump, like seconds before the Super Bowl kicked off, that he's out for the season. We saw, I guess, some of the results of it on Monday. I don't know if they were going to beat Houston with Josh Ojamwina in there. I think Houston's a much better team. But you saw at times, Baylor being exposed because they didn't have a second big out there. And Josh O's been something of a divisive character over his last couple of years at Baylor. But Sydney, I think this is a bigger injury than a lot of people realize.
It is, and I think that carried a little bit of the magnitude into that game. That's something head coach Scott Drew talked about in the press conference. He just was like, we have to learn life without Josh now. Now that he's not a part of this team, how do we adjust? And that's something Norchad Omier also expressed too, because he's kind of got to step up as the one and only big guy in that role. And not that he's not used to playing in that position. That's something he elaborated on that he can do. It's just getting back into rhythm with that and figuring out how to play in this different style at this point in the season. So it's tough to go on without any guy, but I think Josh was kind of one of those silent leaders for the team. He never really read across the stat sheet as somebody whose name always popped out to you week after week. We always talk about VJ. We always talk about Norchad. But Josh was kind of one of those quiet guys that you needed to help VJ and Norchad in those moments to get there. So while he was a big part of distributing the ball, he wasn't always the biggest name on the stat sheet, but his presence made a really big difference. So figuring out where they go from here without him, that's the battle.
Yeah, you look at the stats, right? Whatever, 6.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and you're like, really? This is a big loss for Baylor. Obviously, the depth being one part of it, but I think another big part too is Josh O really understood his role and played it pretty well. And that's something I've been critical about for this team all year, is people finding out their roles still this late in the season and maybe not everyone embracing it. He certainly embraced it. And if nothing else, it was to give a little bit of reprieve for Norchad, even sometimes when they were on the floor together, including in the starting lineup. But now you got to play some real small ball. And it's not that it's impossible, but I'm really looking at guys like Jalen Celestine and Jason Asamoah of, hey, you're not playing center, right? But you've got to help clean up the glass here. You've got to give us some inside presence on both ends of the floor. You got to guard some bigger guys. And you talk about Celestine, a guy who's really struggled, and Asamoah, a guy who's struggled to get minutes. That's a big ask for them in February.
It is. I think it's more likely that you'll see that from Jalen.
Guys played a little bit more?
Just because he's played a little bit more and he's kind of I feel like he fits the vibe better of the starting rotation. There's a reason that we haven't seen Jason as much in the rotation. It just seems like, I don't know. Maybe it's just he doesn't click. I haven't quite figured it out, but there's a reason that he's not getting distributed as much. Now that, of course, has to change because what other options do they have? But Jalen's definitely a guy I think that could fit that. And he matches the energy piece too that Josh brings. Jalen is a guy who's really fun to watch. He can bring the energy. And Josh, although, like I said, he's kind of silent, he gets hyped when big things happen, or he picks up an and one or something happen. He's got a lot of excitement, and I feel like you don't see that from him as much, but that's something I've noticed from him. He's fun to watch. He's one of the guys who I always look for when it comes to a celebration shot, because I know I'm going to get it, and it's going to look kind of angry, but that's what you love. It looks tough. And so you need another tough guy like that to help fill that. I think Jalen fits that mold a little bit more if you want somebody like Josh.
The other thing too with Josh, we talked about his role and how impactful he can be on the court and on the bench too. There were a couple games last year, which I didn't think Josh had a great year last year, but there are two games in particular I remember where I was like, man, that was a Josh O game. And you don't realize it as fans till afterwards, but you're like, he was a mismatch for this team, and he did his job and was a big reason why they won the game. The games I'm thinking of, I think, were both in January, actually. One was at home against Cincinnati, which was a slim win. He had a double-double, and then he had a career high in points at Morgantown in a game last year. I think he had 18 and 10. So, I know that's last year and that's cherry picking, but when you're a team that's kind of in limbo right now and you've got a guy who's now out for the season who could be like an X factor in one of these games coming up, that's a big loss. And now you're a team that is, again, still in this middle ground where you're probably not going to be a 3 or a 4 seed, and you're trying not to become a 10 or 11 seed, because then you're really teetering on the break here. Like, as up and down as Baylor's been this season, does like this injury hurts, but does this really like impact their chances of making the tournament as they sit on like the 8 or 9 seed right now?
It does. Unfortunately, it does. I mean, Coach talked about, again, after the UCF game, he was like, at that point, they were just hoping that they could get Josh back, but they knew it was
praying
serious.
for a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. They knew it was really serious. And I'll tell you, too, watching, because I was right there next to him when it happened. So I was sitting on that court side. And I just thought he hit the ground really hard. That's all I saw. But it seemed like he just hit the crap out of his knee on the hardwood. But as soon as he rolled over and grabbed it, you knew it was something more than he just hit the court really hard. And it really silenced the arena, and it silenced the team. And thankfully, they were able to play and finish strong. But you're talking about at that point, that was their best rotation that they had had in weeks.
Yeah.
You literally take one guy away and look at what happens in Houston. They've had their struggles on the road, so I just think that's a little bit of the challenge there already. But when you take one guy away already, look at how much that impacted them heading into the next game. So yeah, it absolutely has an impact on this team and could really affect their seeding heading into March.
I should be open and transparent about this. I did knock on wood when I said it last week, but previewing that UCF game, I had been saying leading up to that, they're not going to be healthy again. They're not going to be fully healthy again this year. So don't think of them as, they're going to be shorthanded all year. And then they announced that Roach and Love are going to play and that VJ would be back. And I'm like, okay, all right, finally fully healthy. And I did knock on wood because it lasted literally 5 minutes. I hate basing a year off injuries, and I think there are many more problems with this Baylor team than the injuries that they've faced. But if it's not one thing, it's another right now. And this is a critical stretch coming up. These games against West Virginia at home, Arizona or West Virginia, is that at home? Arizona's at home, and then at Cincinnati. Yes, and so Cincinnati is the only road game of that, and that's a tough environment. But you've shown that you're a better team than them. You beat them by 20 last month. So like, you'd be happy with 2 out of 3, but like if you're feeling comfy and sleeping well at night a week and a half from now of Baylor being an NCAA tournament team, it feels like they got to win all 3 of those.
It kind of
if you want to be comfy,
if you want to be tucked in and cozy.
The Homer Simpson meme.
Got the heated blanket.
Yeah. Like you would need to win all 3.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough ask, man. That's a tough ask for this team, not shorthanded. But yeah, it's one of those where I know you've heard it and seen it too, and people look at the numbers and they don't get it. Josh O's been a somewhat divisive figure, kind of like what Flo Thamba was a couple years ago. And yet that loss is a big loss for this team, a big loss. And I think you're right. I think your assessment is right in terms of they could get into hang on for dear life mode in terms of the tournament. But that Kansas win looks good. That St. John's win looks great because they have turned it on. They're top of the Big East for the first time in like 40 years. Hell yeah! Thank you, St. John's, for making that look good. We're going to try to make Baylor baseball look good this year. It was a tough campaign the last 2 years, and everybody's doubting them. We'll tell you why these Cinderella Bears are going to make a big impact in the Big 12 this year. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. Sydney said it earlier, man. Baseball season is here. Woo! It's weird from where I'm at right now. I walked outside, walked the dog. It was 7 degrees outside today, which, look, I can live with that. But it doesn't feel like baseball season. And there is a team right down the street, by the way, that plays Big Ten baseball. I can't believe they're going to be playing this weekend. But the Bears get going. I know you're covering the Aggies a lot. They get going. It's not a lot of hype going into this Baylor baseball season. year 3 under Mitch Thompson. And I believe in Mitch. I believe in this project. I thought, it's funny. I said it in the last segment. I'm going to say it again. I don't love saying a season gets derailed by injuries unless it's like big time stars, whatever. Jason Tatum gets hurt for 30 games for the Celtics. That's a big time miss, right? But they had 4 or 5 regulars go out for a significant amount of time, if not the season, in the first 2 weeks of the season last year. Like they felt that locker room felt pretty good going into 2024. They miss out on that. They don't have the best season they've ever had. And here they come into 2025 with low expectations, Sydney. But Mitch Thompson is using some good old-fashioned Big 12 football motivation.
Yeah, it sounds a little interesting just saying it like that. But he said when we had media availability, I think it was a week or 2 ago now, he was like, we're not looking at the preseason rankings or the polls or anything like that. Because if you do look at it, Baylor's picked to finish second to last in the Big 12. But he was like,
13.
Yeah. Not good.
Tough.
But he was like, look at what Arizona State did in football this season. We're not looking into that. We have this many games to prove ourselves.
Arizona State is going to give everyone hope after that, man. Everyone. Like Oklahoma State's thinking about the next football season. They're like, we're going to go to the playoff now. Like we're in this thing.
Taylor's like, we book hotels in Omaha just in case.
They always leave that on the schedule. When you pick up the schedule this weekend at the ballpark, it'll say regionals, super regionals, College World Series. I have that on a 2023 schedule where they won like 10 games. It was a little bit more than that. But yeah, I love that. Like I love that of, we're not buying into that, especially baseball too. Like I love baseball. You love baseball. You've covered some great college baseball, but I would say that's the least robust of the 3 sports we've talked about today in terms of the preseason coverage and the rankings and the polls 100%. And all that. Certainly it is. And so I'm not saying they get these things wrong, but I think that's the most likely to be like, wow, we were wrong about that team. Like they have a beautiful friggin' Saturday and Sunday starter that we didn't know about. And the middle of their order is great. Like that stuff happens. And the team realizes as well, while they're not looking at the polls, they hear this stuff. Right? They know what it's been like the last couple of years. It's been a long last couple of years. And Wesley Jordan, preseason all Big 12 selection, he kind of more or less echoed the same thing that Mitch Thompson had to say.
We want to show what we're capable of. We're tired of kind of being at the bottom. And so just knowing who we have and who the guys' personalities are, that's kind of what gives me confidence.
Are you buying stock in Baylor baseball this year? You buying it low, selling it high?
I don't know if I'm buying yet. Can I buy halfway?
Well, look, all right. Let's say this. I'm not saying, hey, Sydney, are they buy stock to win the Big 12 championship? Well, this is a team that hasn't made the Big 12 tournament the last couple of years, which only excluded one team, and they were the one. So are you buying stock in that let's just say they finish higher than 10th as they're picked 13th out of 40?
Then yeah.
Can you see that?
I could see that for sure. I mean, we talk about health with the basketball team, but they're a lot healthier this year than they were last year for baseball and returning some guys, which is awesome. So I just really liked their confidence. So that Wesley Jordan, what he was talking about, I had asked him, I was like, you keep bringing up confidence here. Why are you so confident in this group? And that's exactly what he said. He was like, I believe in this group. I believe in this team. Like there's something here. And when we talked to Coach Thompson about that, he was like, we're tired of losing. We're tired of being seen that way.
Yeah.
So we want to change that. And I think when you've got a team that's got a chip or has this like grittiness, I think they can surprise you. So yeah, if I'm putting stock in them finishing higher than 10th in the Big 12, I would buy stock in that.
And look, if they don't make the Big 12 tournament this year and they fall flat on their face again, I'll probably stop saying this, but trust in Mitch Thompson. Baseball is a tougher thing to turn around even than football or basketball. Even in this portal thing, like it's not easy. And it is inherently tougher for private school teams Baylor size. I know there are some that are very successful. Vanderbilt doesn't make the excuse. TCU doesn't make the excuse. Stanford, Dallas Baptist doesn't make the excuse. But it is tougher, and they would say that. And he felt he had a really good team to go out there last year, to a much improved team last year. They get injuries. Mitch Thompson has not done a lot of losing in his career. At Baylor, at Fort Hays State, at McLennan, you wins a national championship at MCC. This will turn around, and this feels like, I don't want to say a prove it year because I don't think he's on the hot seat. Well, if they suck, maybe he is, but it's like this is where we start to see the vision kind of come to fruition, I think, in this year, especially if they stay healthy. So I'm excited. Are you excited to get back out there and film
hearing them like just hit balls at practice? I was like, oh, the bat crack. I love that sound. Like it's, as a reporter, I hate covering baseball because I just want to drink a beer and chill.
I get that.
So it's hard because that's like the one sport I would love to just be a fan for because it's so casual. But it's getting so warm out here. It was in the 70s here last week, 80s. It was so nice. So I'm excited for it to be back.
Love it. Love it. Sydney, we got to get you out to the ballpark. We've got to get you out to Baylor ballpark, not just for BP. We got to get you out there to game. Well, Sunday afternoon, hear Terry's voice over the PA. It's great stuff.
Can't wait.
I'll take you right home. Sydney, thank you so much for joining on another Wicker Wednesday. KCN Channel 6 something app.
Plus, the 6 Plus.
I literally have it, but I never remember the name of it. It's like, I have to look at the sponsor of the episode right before we go on every time. So it's the same thing. Yeah.
All
6
good.
Plus app.
Yeah, all you got to do is download it. It's available on any of your TV streaming platforms. And if you want it on your phone, you just download the KCN app. So you can watch all the stuff on there as well.
Perf. That's what we call perf in the industry. Thank you to Sydney. Thank you to you guys for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, of course, and let me know down in the comments below, is this the most impactful transfer portal class in the Big 12? Would you rather be Baylor? Would you rather be Tech? How much is the Josh O injury going to hurt him? And what do you feel about baseball season? We love it. We love it here, but I want to hear from you. So again, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and we will see you tomorrow on your favorite program, Locked On Baylor.